Marcus Kane stood on the weathered porch of his sprawling ranch, watching the sun dip below the horizon like a golden coin disappearing into the earth's pocket. At 35, he had built an empire from dust and determination, transforming barren land into the most prosperous cattle operation in 3 counties. Yet despite his material success, his heart remained as empty as the vast plains stretching endlessly before him. The Lone Star Ranch was his pride and joy, a testament to years of back-breaking work and shrewd business decisions, but lately it felt more like a gilded cage than a home. "Another evening alone," he muttered, running calloused fingers through his thick, dark hair. The silence was broken only by the distant lowing of cattle settling in for the night and the whisper of wind through the ancient mesquite trees that dotted his property like weathered sentinels. His sister Victoria had been relentless in her matchmaking attempts, arriving every few weeks with another perfect candidate in tow. "You need a wife, Marcus," she'd say during her weekly visits, her voice taking on that particular tone of sisterly concern that he'd grown to dread. "Someone to share this beautiful life you've built. You can't spend forever alone in this big house." But every woman she introduced seemed more interested in his bank account than his soul, more fascinated by his wealth than the man who had earned it through sweat and sacrifice. There was Sophia Hartwell, the banker's daughter, with her perfectly coiffed blonde hair and calculating blue eyes that seemed to appraise everything they looked upon. She'd toured his ranch like she was evaluating real estate, commenting on the investment potential of his land, rather than admiring the breathtaking sunsets that painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples each evening. Her conversation had been peppered with questions about his holdings, his future expansion plans, and his financial projections for the coming years. Then came Isabella Montgomery, a socialite from Dallas whose conversation never strayed from the latest fashions and upcoming social events in the city. She'd wrinkled her perfectly powdered nose at the smell of horses and complained incessantly about the dust that settled on her expensive silk dress and delicate leather shoes. When he'd suggested they take a ride to see the new foals, she'd looked at him as if he'd proposed they roll in mud. After a string of such encounters, Marcus had grown deeply cynical about the possibility of finding genuine love. Perhaps it was a luxury he couldn't afford. A fairy tale reserved for men who hadn't spent their youth building something substantial from nothing. He'd convinced himself that solitude was preferable to the hollow companionship of women who saw dollar signs instead of the man behind them, who viewed him as a means to an end rather than someone worthy of authentic affection. Everything changed the day Rosalind Pierce arrived at his door. She appeared on a Tuesday morning in early spring, when the wildflowers were just beginning to bloom across the meadows. Her auburn hair caught the sunlight like spun copper, creating a halo effect that made her seem almost ethereal. Her green eyes held a mixture of determination and vulnerability that immediately caught his attention and stirred something deep within his chest. She wore a simple blue dress that had seen better days but was clean and well-mended, practical brown boots that showed signs of many miles walked, and carried herself with a quiet dignity that spoke of inner strength forged through hardship. "Mr. Kane? I'm Rosalind Pierce. I understand you're looking for a housekeeper," she said, her voice soft but clear, with just a hint of a southern accent that reminded him of honeysuckle and summer evenings. Marcus studied her face, noting the fine lines around her eyes that spoke of hardship weathered with grace rather than bitterness. There was something in her expression, a carefully controlled pain that resonated with his own guarded heart. "I am. Do you have experience managing a household of this size?" "I managed a large household in Austin for 5 years before." She paused, her voice catching slightly as if the memory still held the power to wound. "Before my circumstances changed rather dramatically. I can provide references if you require them." There was something in her tone, a dignity maintained despite obvious financial distress, that touched him unexpectedly. "That won't be necessary. The position includes room and board, and the salary is fair. When can you start?" "Today, if you'll have me, sir." As the weeks passed, Rosalind transformed the ranch house from a functional but sterile space into a warm, welcoming home. She filled crystal vases with wildflowers picked from the meadows, opened heavy curtains to let in the golden morning light, and cooked meals that made the cavernous dining room feel less like a mausoleum and more like a place where a family might gather. The house began to smell of fresh bread, lavender sachets, and the subtle perfume of the roses she tended in the neglected garden. But it was her quiet, graceful presence that affected Marcus most profoundly. She moved through his world with efficient elegance, never intrusive, but always there when needed. She'd bring him coffee during his morning paperwork sessions, her fingers occasionally brushing his as she set down the delicate china cup, sending unexpected warmth shooting through his chest and making him acutely aware of how long it had been since he'd experienced genuine human connection. In the evenings, she'd sit on the front porch with her mending basket, humming softly while he reviewed the day's accounts and planned for tomorrow's work. Her voice was melodious and soothing, weaving through the evening air like a gentle caress that somehow made the numbers on his ledger sheets seem less important than the woman creating such beautiful sounds just a few feet away. "You have a beautiful voice," he said one evening, unable to contain the compliment any longer. The words escaped before he could stop them, revealing more of his feelings than he'd intended. She looked up from her needlework, startled, her cheeks flushing a becoming shade of pink that made her green eyes seem even more luminous. "My mother used to say I inherited it from my grandmother. She sang in the church choir back in Tennessee before the family moved west seeking better opportunities." "Tell me about your family," Marcus found himself saying, genuinely curious about another person's history for the first time in years. Usually, he kept conversations with employees strictly professional, but something about Rosalind made him want to know everything about her past, her dreams, her fears. Rosalind's expression grew wistful, and she set down her sewing to gaze out at the star-filled sky. "My parents died in a fever outbreak when I was just 16. I married young, thinking I'd found security and love with a charming man who promised me the world." Her voice hardened slightly, and Marcus could see the pain of betrayal flickering in her eyes. "My husband turned out to be more interested in gambling and drinking than in providing for his family. When he died in a saloon fight 3 years ago, he left me with nothing but a mountain of debts and creditors demanding payment." Marcus felt a surge of protective anger toward a man he'd never met, a dead stranger who had clearly failed to appreciate the treasure he'd possessed. "I'm sorry you went through that. It must have been incredibly difficult to rebuild your life. It taught me to rely on myself and trust my own judgment," she said simply, her voice gaining strength. "But it also taught me to recognize and value genuine kindness when I'm fortunate enough to find it." Their eyes met across the porch, and Marcus felt something fundamental shift in his chest, like a door that had been locked tight for years suddenly swinging open to let in light and air. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility and the recognition of two souls who had found something unexpected in each other. As autumn painted the landscape in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, their relationship deepened beyond the boundaries of employer and employee. Marcus found excuses to linger in the kitchen while she cooked, drawn by her easy conversation and infectious laughter that seemed to chase away the loneliness that had been his constant companion for so many years. She'd tell him stories of her childhood adventures, her dreams of traveling to distant places she'd only read about in books, her love of literature and music that revealed an educated mind and cultured soul beneath her humble circumstances. "I've always wanted to see the ocean," she confided one evening as they walked among the horses in the paddock, her voice filled with longing. "I imagine it must be like looking at eternity itself, endless and ever-changing." "I could take you there," Marcus said impulsively, then felt heat rise in his cheeks at his boldness. The offer had escaped before he could consider the implications, revealing the depth of his growing feelings. Rosalind stopped walking, turning to face him with surprise and something that might have been hope flickering in her green eyes. "You would do that? For me? I'd do anything to see you smile the way you're smiling right now," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion he could no longer hide. The air between them crackled with unspoken desire and the weight of feelings that had been building for months. Marcus reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, his fingers tracing the curve of her cheek with reverent gentleness. Her skin was soft as silk beneath his touch, and when she leaned into his caress, her eyes fluttering closed, he felt his heart begin to race. "Rosalind," he whispered, her name a prayer on his lips. "I know this is complicated," she breathed, her hand covering his where it rested against her face. "I'm your employee, and I have nothing material to offer a man of your standing and success. You have everything I've been searching for without even knowing it," he said fiercely, his other hand coming up to frame her face. "Your strength, your kindness, your beautiful heart that sees good in the world despite everything you've endured. I don't care about anything else." Their first kiss was both tender and desperate, years of loneliness and careful emotional barriers melting away in the warmth of their connection. Marcus pulled her closer, marveling at how perfectly she fit in his arms, how right this felt after so many wrong turns and false starts. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, and he could see his own wonder reflected in her eyes. But their newfound happiness was threatened when Victoria arrived unexpectedly the following week with another potential bride in tow. Clarissa Whitmore was everything society deemed appropriate for a man of Marcus's position. Wealthy, well-connected, beautiful, in a cold, classical way, and eager to become the next Mrs. Kane. "She's absolutely perfect for you, Marcus," Victoria gushed, oblivious to the tension that immediately filled the room. "Her father owns half the railroad between here and San Antonio, and she's been educated in the finest schools back east. She speaks 3 languages and plays piano beautifully." Marcus watched Rosalind's face carefully compose itself into a mask of professional politeness as she served tea to their guests, but only he could see the hurt flickering in her green eyes like a candle flame in the wind. The sight made his chest tighten with protective fury. Clarissa monopolized the conversation throughout the afternoon, speaking at length about her travels abroad, her extensive wardrobe, and her detailed plans for improving the ranch house should she become its mistress. "Of course, we'd need to hire a proper staff from the city," she said dismissively, not even glancing at Rosalind as she spoke. "I couldn't possibly manage a household of this size myself. It would be beneath my station." That evening, after the guests had finally retired to their rooms, Marcus found Rosalind in the garden she had lovingly restored, her shoulders shaking with silent tears that broke his heart. "She's everything you should want," Rosalind said without turning around, her voice thick with unshed emotion. "Beautiful, accomplished, wealthy, from your own social circle. She could give you the kind of life you deserve." Marcus turned her gently to face him, his hands insistent but tender. "She's everything I thought I wanted before I discovered what love really means." "Love?" The word escaped her lips like a whispered prayer, hope and fear warring in her expression. "I love you, Rosalind Pierce," he declared, his voice strong and certain. "I love your courage in the face of adversity, your compassion for others, despite your own struggles, the way you make this house feel like a true home for the first time in my life. I love how you find beauty in simple things and create joy from small moments. I love the woman you are, not what you can give me, or how you might enhance my social standing." Tears streamed down her face as she reached up to cup his cheek, her touch gentle and reverent. "I love you too, Marcus. So much it frightens me sometimes. I never thought I could feel this way again after everything that happened." Their kiss was passionate and desperate, filled with the fear of losing each other and the fierce joy of finally speaking their deepest truth. Marcus held her as if she might disappear, pouring all his devotion and desire into the tender caress of his lips against hers. The next morning, Marcus made his choice abundantly clear. He politely but firmly declined Clarissa's obvious expectations and asked his sister to respect his decision to follow his heart rather than social conventions. Victoria was initially shocked and disappointed, but when she witnessed the genuine happiness radiating from her brother's face and saw the way he looked at Rosalind with such obvious adoration, understanding slowly dawned in her eyes. "She makes you truly happy, doesn't she?" Victoria asked quietly, watching Marcus and Rosalind work together in the garden, their easy companionship and obvious affection impossible to ignore. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Marcus replied honestly. "She sees me for who I really am, not what I own or what I can provide. That's worth more than all the social connections in the world." Victoria nodded slowly, her expression softening. "Then that's all I ever wanted for you, dear brother. True happiness." The engagement was announced quietly, without fanfare or elaborate celebrations. Marcus wanted their love story to remain intimate and personal, free from the scrutiny and judgment of society. They spent their engagement period planning a simple life together, discussing their dreams for the future and deepening their emotional and physical connection. 6 months later, Marcus and Rosalind were married in a beautiful but intimate ceremony on the ranch, surrounded by wildflowers that Rosalind had planted and the endless Texas sky that had witnessed their love story unfold from its very beginning. The local minister performed the service under an arch of roses and jasmine, while a small gathering of close friends and ranch hands looked on with genuine warmth and approval. As they exchanged heartfelt vows they had written themselves, Marcus knew with absolute certainty that he had found something infinitely more precious than material success: a love built on mutual respect, genuine affection, shared values, and the courage to be completely vulnerable with another soul. "I promise to love you not for what you can give me, but for who you are," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion as he gazed into Rosalind's tear-filled eyes. "You are my heart, my home, my everything. I will stand by you through all of life's seasons, in joy and in sorrow, in abundance and in want." Rosalind's response was equally heartfelt and moving. "I promise to be your partner in all things, to support your dreams while pursuing my own, to love you with everything I am for all the days of my life. You have shown me that I am worthy of love, and I will spend forever proving myself worthy of yours." Their wedding night was a tender exploration of passion long denied. Two hearts finally free to express the full depth of their devotion without reservation or fear. In the quiet aftermath, as Rosalind lay contentedly in his arms, her head resting on his chest while he stroked her silky hair, Marcus whispered against her temple, "Thank you for teaching me what love really means." "Thank you for showing me I was worthy of it," she replied softly, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on his skin. Years later, as they watched their children play in the same meadows where they had fallen in love, Marcus often reflected on the unexpected path that had led him to such profound happiness. He had learned that true love wasn't about finding someone who fit society's expectations or enhanced one's social standing, but about finding someone whose soul recognized and completed his own. The Lone Star Ranch was no longer just a symbol of his business success. It had become a testament to love's transformative power and a sanctuary where two wounded hearts had found healing, purpose, and joy in each other's arms.